I'm Catherine Long, editor of the Catholic Sun, and I'm here with Bishop Thomas Costello, retired auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Syracuse. So, Bishop Costello, before you served in the Catholic schools, you were served by the Catholic schools. So, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your Catholic education?
Began in third grade. It was at St. Aloysius Academy in Rome, which was the parish school of St. Peter's Parish. Aloysius Murphy was one of the first pastors. In order to attend St. Aloysius, one had to be a member of St. Peter's Parish. And to be a member of St. Peter's Parish, a family had to have a pew in the church. Pew rent was 50 cents a month, or $6 a year.
Wow.
That was my tuition. Interestingly, every September when we came back for the next year, the very first question that was asked, is your address the same? Before I had to admit we didn't have a telephone in our home, what is your pew number? 45.
You still remember?
I still remember. It was on the right-hand side of the center aisle, the epistle side of the church, as we called it in those days. Our teachers were, with one exception, Sisters of St. Joseph. A sister's stipend 80 years ago, that's what it was $50 a day, once a month, $600 a year. So tuition was $6, and teacher salaries were $600. Of course, the economy was different then too. Bread was a dime a loaf, milk was 8 cents a quart. I remember very well when the minimum wage was raised to 60 cents an hour, and I mused, how amazing, a penny a minute to do your work. I stayed at St. Aloysius all the way through high school. We did acknowledge students from other parishes in the high school section, and their tuition was $50 a year. The education was very solid. I left SAA and went to Niagara and found myself well prepared to cope with the challenge of college. After 2 years at Niagara, I transferred to St. Bernard's Seminary in Rochester. I only lasted 3 years there. I was sent to Washington for the last 3 years of my training. So Catholic education is where I come from grade 3 to postgraduate, all under Catholic auspices.
Was it important to your parents that you have a Catholic education?
Obviously it was. I wouldn't have been there. My mother was a public school teacher, and eventually a guidance counselor and then a principal. And I don't think that she ever had to take any heat that her child wasn't in the public school where she taught and administered. But obviously it was their choice that I go to SAA.
So after all of that wonderful Catholic education and serving in parishes here in the diocese, you went on to serve as a superintendent, and I believe it was from 1960 to 1975.
You got it.
15 years manning this ship. Can you tell us about that time, what it was like, and what you achieved during those years?
June 1, 1960 was the beginning date. I was 6 years a priest and all of 31 years old. And I was clearly in over my head. But I dove into the deep end of the pool with the kind of enthusiasm that only unawareness can sponsor. The very first public responsibility I had after June 1st, 1960, was to participate in the dedication of the brand new Notre Dame High School in Utica, school for boys. I even had a speaking part in the program. And later that summer, we dedicated Utica Catholic Academy for girls. In 1961, the diocese undertook a finance campaign to raise money for diocesan high schools. We raised a little over $8 million. And in September of 1963, Bishop Ludden here in Syracuse, Rome Catholic, and Binghamton Catholic Central High Schools all opened. In 65, Bishop Grimes was opened as well. In 61, the brothers at CBA were preparing to move to Randall Road, and the convent school for girls was flourishing. We peaked in enrollments in 1964. There were 43,265 young people under instruction in our schools. At that time, not only were high schools expanding and growing, but elementary schools were hatching like rabbits all over the diocese. Our faculty still was principally sisters and brothers, and a few priests, although the lay teachers were beginning to play their role as well. They were just exciting years. The diminishment began after that, and obviously has continued. Today, I think we have something like 4,600 kids in our Catholic school system. And I was quite surprised to learn that almost 1,000 of those are preschool children. I think that might be a very fertile field for us. If we could convince the parents of the 3 and 4-year-olds to stay with us for kindergarten, I think we could begin to build enrollments again. Tuition, of course, is, well, when we opened Ludden and Rome Catholic and Binghamton, we were very bold. We decided we had to charge tuition, and it would be $150 a year. Today, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000. Part of the battle in the early 60s was the constant struggle to secure some kind of public assistance for children, their parents, who chose non-public schools. And I must say the legislatures were quite cooperative. We had a bunch of successes, only for each one of them to be knocked down by the judiciary. Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965 maneuvered the passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act at the federal level, which has been a boon to us all those years. In 1967, we had a constitutional convention, and the convention actually voted to repeal the so-called Blaine Amendment, that part of our state constitution that prohibits funding for non-public schools. But the voters turned the new constitution down. Blaine was part of the reason they turned it down, but there were several other controversial issues that factored in. More and more, the lay teachers become part of our school system, and I want to assure people that lay teachers are of value. They bring some values that religious can't. I remember Frank Didio was the coach and phys ed director at Rome Catholic when we opened. And the kids noticed that as he began whatever exercise it was that he was leading, it always began with the sign of the cross and a prayer. But ever when he made the sign of the cross, he touched his wedding ring. Well, that's something a priest couldn't convey. I'm not sure what it said to the kids, but they got a message. And lay teachers are just great examples. They're a real strength for our system. And in terms of financial contributions, their sacrifices are by far the largest non-tax deductible contributions that our schools receive. We survive not only on their academic and professional prowess, but on their generosity and their charity as well. They're a gift to us. The schools are smaller and fewer. I'm convinced that they still are the most effective way that the church has, provided families reinforce by their practice and by their lifestyles what the school stands for. The school is still the most effective educational instrument that the church has for training young children, young people.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe during your time as superintendent, there was also a movement to integrate the schools here in Syracuse.
Integration in the 1960s was a big issue everywhere. With the development, the emergence of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965, collaboration and cooperation between the non-public schools and the public school systems was almost mandated. I cannot exaggerate how cooperative schools throughout our diocese, school districts throughout our diocese were in meeting this new responsibility. Many of them were philosophically opposed to what they were doing, but the law was the law, and I can't praise them enough for their collaboration. Here in the city of Syracuse, it was simply outstanding. There were some people within the district who became very, very precious to us, very helpful to us. As this relationship developed, my proximity to the Syracuse Board of Education, the members of the Board of Education, became more intense. We became very good friends. I regularly attended school district meetings. There was a classic meeting at Prescott School, I believe it was. The issue was busing of children for the purpose of integration. And it was a heated meeting. At one point, an angry parent stood up and proclaimed that before they would bus his child, the child would be transferred to the Catholic school system. Without a whisper of authority, I responded that the Catholic schools in the city of Syracuse were not receiving transfer students from the public system. If someone moved in from outside, we would be happy to welcome them. But for people leaving the public schools, at least temporarily, the Catholic schools were not an alternative. I had no authority to say that, but thank God, 48 hours later, I was affirmed in what I had said. Bishop Forey and Bishop Cunningham #1, could not have been more supportive of the Catholic school system. They were convinced that this is what we should be doing. It was their initiative that started that fund drive in '61 and resulted in the new high schools in '63 and '65. They were exciting days.
You kind of spoke to this a little bit before, so let me take you back. Why, in your opinion, is Catholic school education so important? Why should we support it?
Well, they're Catholic schools. Schools are academic institutions. And a Catholic school has to be good academically. And I believe we are. In fact, in more recent days, Middle States Accrediting Association has visited and affirmed every one of our schools. That's a great, great feather in the cap of the present administration. They're also Catholic. And this is a value system, a system that inculcates virtue. And not only are we looking to make good citizens, we're also looking to have people who have a grounding in their faith. and who can bring the church's values and the church's teachings into the public forum. It's a formation for life, really. And to review the success stories of Catholic school graduates in the Diocese of Syracuse, it's an awesome experience. I will name just one of our success stories. His name was Theodore Hesburgh. Class of 1936, Most Holy Rosary High School. But Ted Hesburgh is one of literally thousands of people who have become good citizens, good members of the church, valuable contributors to society. I believe that our schools perform a public service as well as fostering our faith. So they're both Catholic and schools. They have to be both.
Very well put. And I will end with, in light of all your years of Catholic school education, both as a student and as an administrator, what does it mean for you to be now receiving this award from the Catholic Schools Office?
I'm the junior varsity to the awardee, who is James Moynihan. I've been junior varsity to him for many years. Bishop Moynihan's contribution to Catholic schools is at least outstanding. He was not happy when he had to amalgamate or terminate Catholic schools. It was painful to him. I saw it. I experienced it. But bless him, he had the courage of his convictions. He was a man of duty. And when he saw what was necessary, despite how it pained him personally, he did what had to be done. He commissioned the Heritage Campaign, which raised millions of dollars for Catholic schools. He oversaw 14 Hope Appeals. They support Catholic schools. He very tactfully assured that the Diocese of Syracuse would be included in the estate of Mr. Robert McDevitt, the largest single gift the diocese has ever received, which, to a degree, supports Catholic schools. I don't know how many people know it, but Bishop Moynihan also conducted a personal campaign approaching people within the diocese who were able to help support Catholic schools. It was done very privately, very quietly. There was no hoopla about it, but significant dollars in tuition aid were also raised in that effort. Bishop Moynihan is a champion of Catholic schools. He deserves this award.
So no praise for yourself there, huh?
Try not.
Thank you so much.